basically, the Labour government, within 3 weeks, are ditching their promises not to raise taxes, and working people will be affected.
Well, I've just been hearing the Chancellor is looking to lay bare the state of the economy and to pin it squarely on the Conservatives. How much of that actually holds water? And with the Conservative Party set to spend its summer discussing a potential new leader, what are they going to do about it from the opposition benches? John Glen was in the Treasury this time last year before heading to the Cabinet Office. He's now the Conservative shadow paymaster general, and he joins us now. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Just on this black hole business, do you accept that there is, as is being said, a 20 billion black hole in public finances?
No, I don't. What I say is that, as in every fiscal event I've been involved in, which is most of them over the last 8 years in various forms in the Treasury, is that there are always pressures. Spending departments will always say they could do with more money. But the job of the Chancellor is usually to push back, to show restraint, to put in reforms on productivity, public sector reforms, which is what we would have done with strong welfare package reforms as well, that would ease some of those pressures. I'm not saying that some of those numbers and the additional money for the pay for public sector, that was an independent body came up with that. The question then is, how do you deal? Do you raise taxes as the first reaction? Or do you actually say, like I did last year, well, departments need to absorb some of this additional, in fact, all of this additional cost? So I think that with the OBR that we had set up in 2010, 2011, there is full transparency around the public finances, and that is an updated document. It comes out alongside every fiscal event. So I don't deny that there are pressures, but the question is, there are choices and priorities. And one of the things you said earlier about with Paul Johnson, what he says about the 20 billion mirroring what they've said is the 20 billion, that presumed didn't take into account the choices that also Rachel Reeves will have in any fiscal event in the autumn of how she allocates money and what she does about reform. It's not a static, inevitable trajectory of growth in public spending across unprotected departments. And you can deliver things different and better, as we've been doing with the diagnostic centres and different things in the NHS, for example, to build on the additional investment that we've made over the last 14 years.
I mean, just on this,
since 2010.
And you heard what was being said by Mr. Reid. I mean, the allegation was that things have been covered up, sort of deceit, that Rwanda cost 300 million more than was said, that the cost of sorting out prisons was not taken into account. What do you say to that there's been some deception?
I don't accept that deception whatsoever. I certainly recognise that delivering the prisons quickly enough to deal with the demand that exists in the system was a major challenge, and my former colleague Alex Chalk was doing a very difficult job over his whatever it was 14 months in tenure. And clearly, the Rwanda scheme had not yet got up and running, and there were lots of costs and speculations around how that would develop going forwards, but the government have removed any deterrent and stopped that now. So they've put money into another policy, which is essentially what we were doing anyway. So I don't accept that. I think that in the world, as I say, of an OBR where there is a lot of transparency, there is always speculations about a range of pressures going forward. That is natural as you look at government, but it's not the same as actually saying there were nailed down additional pressures. I mean, basically, the Labour government, within 3 weeks, are ditching their promises not to raise taxes, and working people will be affected. It looks like their pensions and investments will be affected if some of these briefings and speculations are right about increases in CGT, whatever, and we'll find out, I guess, in the autumn.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see what they do about taxes. Now, moving on to your party, the Conservative Party, are you a candidate for the leadership?
No, I don't think I have the qualities, or it's the right stage in my career to be looking at this. I admire all of my colleagues who put their names forward. I work with, obviously, a number of them very closely. I love my party, but we've got to deal with the appalling defeat, learn lessons, show a bit of humility, contrition, and realism about what's happened. And I think it's good that we've got a decent amount of time for all the candidates to explain their views over what's gone wrong, and more importantly, look to the future for the country. How are we going to be an effective opposition, and how are we going to get into a position where, you know, we have this massive Labour majority, but with less than 34% of the vote nationally? What does that mean for the trajectory towards the next election in 4 to 5 years' time? Nothing is certain in politics. We've seen a lot of volatility, and I think that the leadership election process will allow all the candidates to be fully tested, and I think that's very necessary.
I think we've got 6 now. If, as expected, Kevin Badenoch enters the race.
Yeah.
Are you backing any of them?
No, I'm going to keep my counsel until we get much later on in the process. And I also think one of the other things that I felt is that the membership of the party became detached from the MPs. And a number of my members here in Salisbury were saying, well, you know, we didn't vote for Rishi, why did we get him? And I just want this time for the membership to own the outcome, to be comfortable with it on the basis of a full scrutiny over a decent amount of time. That, I think, is what the party membership wants. And that seems to me will lay the foundations for somebody with a strong mandate from the voluntary side and the members of Parliament as we seek to move forward and become an effective opposition and work towards rehabilitating our reputation as we move towards the next general election. We have got to accept what's happened is quite significant. We don't want to go on and on analysing it, but we do need to come to terms with it, reflect on it, and move forward in a united fashion.
I mean, the timetable is going to last 4 months. We got William Hague and Boris Johnson, Michael Howard all today saying, actually, you know, there are more important matters for the Conservatives to think about than the leadership. Doesn't the party run the risk of looking a bit ridiculous?
No, not really. I mean, we did had an extended period in 2005, and I remember working in the research department. David Davis was going to be the leader. By the time we got to party conference, it looked very different. We had a different outcome, and we know what happened 5 years later. So I think it's very important we get the right choice. But I think the other point is to the point about, you know, the job of opposition goes on. And, you know, I will do that constructively, as I've tried to in this conversation this morning. But, you know, we can be His Majesty's official opposition whilst we're going through this process. Obviously, a lot of the time period ahead is during the recess, and there'll be opportunities for the candidates to get around the country as well. Of course, we want it to happen as quickly as possible. We also need to do it in a way that everyone feels that, you know, the candidates have been put through their paces, and the one we have is the one that is best placed to lead us going forward.
John Glen, can I ask you before we let you go? At the very end of our interview with Steve Reed, he was talking about a cover-up. He accused the former Conservative government, and specifically the Prime Minister, and I assume the Home Secretary, of covering up the extent of money spent and the extent of problems. What do you say to that?
Well, I don't accept that. I think that we have a massive amount of scrutiny from the media, from the OBR, from analysts. We have the National Audit Office, who publish a large number of reports on a regular drumbeat of publications. So obviously a lot of people will ask questions about these different elements, and I welcome that scrutiny. But I think, you know, what we're seeing is a government that, in a rather sort of casual fashion, is desperate to ditch the pledges made during the general election, take difficult decisions very early. But I don't think the country will forgive them on tax. We already have a high tax burden. Many in my party would have liked us to have made larger tax cuts. What they want to do is increase taxes further, it seems, and without addressing this massive challenges of reform in welfare, reform in public sector productivity, a process that I started. So no, I don't accept that. But I do hope and believe that in our democracy and with the way that we're set up as a country, we have very sophisticated mechanisms to challenge on that. But I don't accept the headlines he's generated this morning.